We want to welcome everyone to our broadcast on homotoxicology. This is going to be the third in the ongoing series of broadcasts related to your health and your happiness and sometimes your welfare. Before we get started on the broadcast today on homotoxicology, there needs to be some preliminary statements made. The first statement is that this is an extremely important subject. I have to say that many years ago when I went to Germany to study with the various practitioners and to Austria, I noticed in the library of the doctors a big thick book called Homotoxicology. By the second or third study trip, we inquired of the doctors what homotoxicology was, and with a surprised look on their face, they said, "Oh, you don't know about homotoxicology? You cannot do effective therapy if you do not understand homotoxicology." So our interest was tweaked, but of course this big book was in German. Later they decided to make a translation for English, and so they shrunk a big book, which was about this thick, down to a book about this thick in English called Homotoxicology. Unfortunately, the English version is now out of print. I did notice in a book search that there was one or two available, but they were asking in the neighborhood of $200 to $300 for them. So I don't think too many people will be anxious to purchase one at this point. My suspicion is that down the road they will republish again because it is extremely important information. Now, I know they've done other study programs, and basically they're concerned with it being available for doctors as opposed to the general public, because a doctor cannot do effective therapy, really, without knowing homotoxicology. Now, I know that when we show you this today on our broadcast, you will not be able to see the print of the charts that we will be showing you. They're too small. So what I decided to do is that we will make available for purchase a DVD of this broadcast. And on that DVD, we will, or along with that I should say, we will give you a set of handouts that will be copies of the various charts and also a lot of background information on homotoxicology. In fact, it will be a fairly thick, at least about a half-inch of material that will help you to go through step by step what I'll be telling you today. Now, I do believe you'll be able to at least get a basic idea of what it's about today, but once you have the charts in your hand and you can follow what I'm talking about on the broadcast, then you'll be able to grasp what it is that we're talking about, and I think also the importance of knowledge of this subject. You can order it by going to our website, which is called mindyourhealthcast.com, and I believe it would be on the shopping page. It will be listed with the information that you can order direct from there. I believe if you really are interested in your health, this is something you're going to want to have because it definitely gives you a whole new insight into how you get sick and how you get well, which is in fact the subtitle of my presentation on homotoxicology, is how you get sick, how you get well. Unfortunately, regular medicine does not have a theory on how the body functions in terms of sickness and health. The pharmaceutical companies, as well as the doctors, have been trained in somehow managing symptoms. By the time you get through with the presentation, you are going to maybe have a different view about that type of therapy and begin to look for a therapy that really will make you well. And that means a therapy that, number one, understands how your body works, and number two, will tell the practitioner where you need the assist and whether you're actually getting better or getting worse. And that's something else that homotoxicology has the ability to tell you. Now, this is based on a series of charts, and I know you can't see anything on them because the print is too small, but I'm holding up one of the original charts, and this is, as Dr. Hans Heinrich Racheweg laid the whole concept out many, many years ago. Now, over the years, they've tended to alter them slightly and simplify them slightly, so that here was one of the next versions, and this is one of the latest versions. They all basically say the same thing. They change the way the different groupings of organs and tissues in the body are presented. But bottom line, they're all saying pretty much the same thing. The one that we're going to be showing you from is the original layout, which had the different tissue layers on the chart, and the way that as your body gets sicker, you go to different tissue layers. And so you'll be able to get the general concept from what I'm talking about. But as I say, unfortunately, we tried different ways of zooming in, but at this point, we weren't able to get a really good clear picture up close so that you can read it. In fact, sometimes it's hard to read otherwise because the print is a bit on the small side. So the whole thing came about from Dr. Reckeweg, Hans Heinrich Reckeweg, many, many years ago in Germany. He got the idea from having been a specialist, not only in medicine and drugs, but the toxicological condition of drugs. In other words, what do they do to your body when you take drugs into the body? So he had become an expert in drug toxicology. As time went on, somehow he got into a program on homeopathic medicine. And the program on homeopathic medicine got him into the whole idea of actually getting a person well. As today, back then, it was the same thing since World War II, and the pharmaceutical interests realized that they could synthesize molecules and make synthetic molecules which they could patent. The whole concept, of course, was to manage symptoms. If you have a fever, you take a drug that takes down your fever. If you have an inflammation, you have a drug that stops the inflammation. If you have a pain, you have a drug that stops the pain. Little regard was given as to why you have the pain and why you have the inflammation and why you have the fever, and is that in fact bad, or is it really good for your health, maybe making you feel bad, but actually good for your health. So we're going to start out with the basic layout. As he studied the human body and got into it more and more, he discovered that there's two different classifications of illness. Basically, there is the more superficial or acute type illnesses, and there's the deeper, more chronic illnesses. But he didn't stop there. He wanted to get much more precise than that. And so he ended up working out into a chart a group of phases. In other words, as you move from one phase to another, your health state changes. And there is a direction that you can go, which is not good. And if you can see the chart at all, if you can see the chart, you can see that I have marked, there is a center line, and there's a total of 6 phases. There's 3 phases on the what's called the humoral side, or humor, and I'm sure most of you have heard of body humors or fluids. So he found that there were 3 levels or phases in the humoral side. And so those are basically more where the acute problems take place. In fact, in the center of the 3 phases, there's 3 columns. In the center, you see that I have an arrow pointing downward. This is the place where all of the itises take place. Now, I guess we need to clarify what an itis is. An itis is an inflammation, basically. Now, I know that most people think of inflammations as being bad. Inflammations are not necessarily bad. What it means is that there is something that is in the body that the body does not want. And so in order to get rid of it, what happens is your body has to inflame. Now I'm going to talk in a moment about inflammation, what it is, But it's because of this particular issue that really one of the biggest deceptions has been sold to the public in order to sell the various medications that are put out today. Basically, what those drugs do is they shut down the symptoms of inflammation. And as I say, we'll talk about those in a moment, just what they are. But what they're doing when they shut down symptoms is they are shutting down the immune system, because the immune system utilizes inflammation to help the body get rid of something that does not belong there. As we get through this, I think you'll have a broader concept and begin to realize that the symptoms are not bad at all. In fact, symptoms are telling you that your body's immune system is doing its job. If you were not to have symptoms, that could be serious, especially when I've had people come in and say, well, my husband or wife has never been sick. They have a very strong immune system. They never get a cold. They never get a flu. They never get sick at all. And so I know they have a really strong immune system. And then they come down with cancer. And then I've heard them say, well, how could that possibly be? Because they've been healthy all these years. With a strong immune system, they never had any problems. Well, unfortunately, we're always exposed to toxins. We're always exposed to viruses. We're always exposed to internal toxins generated from everyday living. And if we don't inflame to get rid of those, then they stay inside our system and begin to shut things down more. Eventually, a total shutdown of the immune system means you don't respond to anything. You can put anything in your body, you can do all kinds of things, and you don't get, quote, sick, which really means you don't have any inflammations. If you never have any inflammations, then you're in big trouble. Your immune system is not doing its job. I'd say the second biggest thing that was taught to the public is the germ theory of disease. Now, if you look in the books, you will see it is referred to as the germ theory. It is a theory. That's the prevalent theory taught today, that bad guys get in your body, they make you sick, you kill out the bad guys and everything is fine. Works very well in simplicity, but just remember, the word is theory, not fact. So the problem will be, as you look through this chart, as we work through it, you will find that suppressing the immune system is not good. It may make you feel better, but what's going to happen is it's going to cause the problem to penetrate deeper into the body. And that's what we're going to be showing as we go through the chart, is that in fact it does make you sicker and sicker. So then if you suppress something, or your body's unable to take care of something, it goes deeper into the system with a new set of symptoms. Now, if you're given a suppressive agent and you shut down the immune system and you feel better because no more symptoms, and then later new symptoms come up, you will be told and you will believe that your body has found some new problem or developed a new problem. The fact is, it in most cases will not be a new problem. It will be the same problem driven deeper into the system. And so that's what we're going to be talking about a lot at least. So as it goes deeper and deeper, it goes on and on and on until finally one could be treated to death, literally. The problem is that in the last several years, you've probably been hearing a lot, well, medicine has done quite well with acute problems, meaning taking drugs that suppress inflammatory symptoms, but have not done so well with chronic. In fact, what's happening is that the chronic is getting more and more pronounced. Okay, so at least in my mind, one of the major contributors to that is the fact that people have taken more and more powerful suppressive agents, more and more powerful antibiotics, more steroids to depress the immune function or inflammation, therefore leading to a big problem. No wonder that the health care bill has gone so high in this country. In fact, they call it a health treatment or health management program, but it's basically a sick management program. It does not produce health. In fact, it's requiring more and more clinics, more and more hospitals, more and more personnel getting in to the field, because when everything else is down business-wise, the health industry, or I call it the sickness industry, is growing. I think that not letting people know that what has really happening is, to me, fraudulent. Say, when you take this, you understand we're only shutting down the symptoms. We're not taking care of the actual problem. In fact, in most cases, we have no idea what the problem is. So I've told you about Rethinking and his 6-phase table, which we're talking about here. And we want to talk a little bit about the inflammation now. Inflammation, basically, as I said, is a reaction by the body to something that should not be there. The body does a series of things. In the old Latin, it was called rubor, calor, tumor, and dolor, which meant redness, heat, swelling, and pain. So when we have those conditions present, we have an inflammation. Now, in a few cases, you also could have some fever with that. So what is happening is, and that's what actually Rethinking calls on this chart, he refers to this column as the reaction phase. The body is reacting, and it's trying to get rid of something. Now, as these take place, they go down further and further and get worse. And as they go up this way, they get lighter. And if they are not actually taken care of, meaning either the body resolves it or you do something natural to help the body resolve it at a faster rate, it starts to move this direction on the chart. Now, those are the second 3 phases. And so those are the impregnation, degeneration, and neoplastic, or some say dedifferentiation phase, which would really be malignant, or at least tumor growth. So the bottom line is, if you suppress agents being removed from the body, such as environmental toxins or external or internal toxins of various sorts, either way, if you suppress that in some way, you're going to push it deeper into the system. And if you continue to do so, it's going to go this way, which goes into the very serious illnesses. So basically, on the acute side, you have the reaction phase. If you properly handle it, or if you leave the body alone and it properly handles it, we didn't show the arrow, but it moves this way into what are called excretion phases. And that's very important that you understand that when you develop or pick up a flu virus, and your body develops an immune response to that, it has inflammation, and it has sometimes fever, and that inflammation is going to bring in blood and lymph to an area. That's why there's redness and heat. You bring more blood in, it brings in more body heat. And it also is going to bring in white cells, and when you do this, it's going to cause the tissue to swell. So it's not only going to turn red from the heat, and it's going to be hot, but it's going to swell, and therefore if it pushes against pain receptor sites, it can hurt. So those are those 4 symptoms we mentioned about. Redness, heat, swelling, and pain are the characteristics of an inflammatory response. So those all take place in this reaction phase. Now, if you do nothing to the body and it corrects it on its own, it will move in this direction. And moving in this direction will actually cause it to be excreted from the body. And so there's various routes that it can be excreted. We'll just mention them briefly. The urine is one. The feces or bowel tract is the second. The lung is the third. The skin is the fourth. All of those are ways that the body will remove those poisons and bring them out to the surface to get rid of them. And the other biggie is, of course, the mucous membrane. You're going to get a lot of sometimes mucus production. If you have something in the sinus area, a rhinovirus, and your body has mounted an immune response, then you're going to get swelling in there. So your nose is going to plug up. And what else is going to happen? As your body gets rid of the things that were left there that are deposited, or the toxic things, it's going to produce a lot of mucus to flush it out. The fastest way to get it out of the sinus is through the mucous membrane, bring it right to the surface. So you're not actually spreading it at that point even, because it's already past the spreading phase. Most people, in fact all people, when they pick up a flu virus or a rhinovirus, they have spread it before they even know they have it. The symptom phase that you're aware of the mucus production, the swelling, the congestion, the coughing, sneezing, all those things that are going on at that point, is your body trying to get rid of the debris left from the immune system neutralizing the virus. So it's important that you understand that those are not bad. Now, I know what happens with modern medicine. They're going to give you a decongestant, and the decongestant will cause the blood flow to the mucous membrane to be turned off so that the swelling goes down. It's going to shut down the basophil release of histamines, which are what causes the blood to come there in the first place and causes that redness and heat and swelling and so forth. And they may give you some painkiller, and they may give you some other sedative type medications depending on the particular mixture that you're given. But in any case, what you're going to do is you're going to interfere with the body getting rid of those poisons that were generated as a result of the body neutralizing the flu virus and now trying to get rid of all that debris. So what you do is, if you stop that too many times, in accordance with this concept, you start causing it to move over this direction, which is getting worse. Anytime you're moving in this direction on the chart, you're getting worse. Okay, so the third of the three phases on the acute side is called the deposition phase. That means you deposit the poisons into the interstitial spaces and fluids of the body. It's still easier to get rid of when it's in the deposition phase, but in the deposition phase you can get things to develop like warts and polyps, and things of that nature will start to develop in the body as a result of being poisoned by these toxins that have accumulated in the humors or fluids of the body. And basically this takes place internally into some area called the matrix. This is an area of some connective tissue and fluids and so forth that actually have the characteristics of jello, meaning they can be fluid or they can be more gel depending on the environment of that tissue. So as you deposit all these toxins and are not getting rid of them, there is a dividing point, which is a cell wall or biological division between inside the cells and outside the cells. This is extremely important, because if it does cross, if it crosses over to this side, that means it has crossed the cell wall and has now gone inside the cell. And that is referred to as the impregnation phase, which means now these poisons that the body never was able to get rid of are going inside the cell and begin to affect cell function. If you continue to suppress and suppress every time something comes along, you're going to slowly poison cells depending on where these toxins have accumulated, which ultimately is going to lead to the next phase, which is the degenerative phase. That means that there's enough poisons inside the cell that it's starting to interfere with the cell function to the point that they may start to change. In other words, you may shut down energy production or the mitochondria. You may shut down the cellular defense system inside. You may overload it with free radicals. It starts to damage the contents of the cell. So consequently, in this degenerative phase, you get such things as tuberculosis, lupus, those kinds of problems, which are beginning to be very serious problems. Multiple sclerosis is in this area. So you have pushed so many poisons in that you poison the interior function of the cells. The only thing that's left if you overload the cell and it no longer is able to carry on its proper function, it becomes so poisoned that the poisons penetrate the nucleus of the cell and begin to change the DNA. That's why it's called the neoplastic phases. That means that once the poisons get into this area, it begins to actually alter the genetic expression in the cell and can lead to serious cancers or tumor developments of various sorts, depending on the type of tissue that these poisons have been suppressed to. So it becomes extremely important to understand where a person is on this chart or this graph when they come into your office. I consider this to be one of the best pieces of knowledge that I ever received, was understanding how this takes place. Because then it told me if somebody comes in that's has had tuberculosis, I know they're way over here. In order to get them well, those poisons had to be cleaned out of the cells and moved all the way back over to the inflammatory phases, because now the body is going to have to inflame to get this out. And to get it out, then it will move to the excretion phases and we'll get rid of it. Now, in natural medicine for years, they have talked about something called a healing crisis or an aggravation. Well, this is what an aggravation is, that an old problem has been mobilized and the body has now started an immune response to get rid of it. Okay, so that means that it's going to be uncomfortable because now you have redness, heat, swelling, and pain, and, as I say, potentially fever. So it's not really comfortable when this starts to happen. So all of a sudden you get a terrible sore throat. Your neck gets stiff because the lymph nodes are swollen along the spinal column. Your eyes start to water. Your nose starts to drip. You start to cough out all kinds of things. Your skin breaks out. Those are all symptoms of not a problem, but of your body trying to solve a problem, because you now are removing something that has been being pushed in for a long time, and now the body is getting an opportunity, because you've given something that's going to help it, to mobilize a defense against that and start to move it out. So it could be the lung, bronchitis, it could be the bowel tract, a colitis, it could be inflammation, breakout of the skin, shingles. Unfortunately, there's a deeper level with that, but that can come as a result of that. There could be skin acne, boils, breakouts. All of those things could start occurring once the body has kicked into gear and has said, okay, we want to get rid of this stuff. Now, if you've taken many suppressive therapies over the years, it may be very difficult because you may be way over here in these areas, and it takes more work to bring you back from here over to here than it does materials that have just been deposited in the humors of the body are much easier to get out. Now, this is why when you have a child that has developed a very bad ear or throat inflammation, which is not a disease, it's a response of the immune system. And I think it's very important that we get clear in our head that symptoms are not a disease. A group of symptoms gathered together do not constitute a disease. It constitutes grouping a group of symptoms together and giving it a name. Inflammation is not a disease. Inflammation is an immune response in the body to get rid of something that does not belong there, that the body does not want there. Now, it's very difficult because if you go to a doctor, he looks in your throat and it's red and the lymph nodes in the throat called tonsils are swollen. He says you have a tonsillitis, and then you think, oh, well, now I know what I have. No, you don't know what you have. You know that the immune system is trying to get rid of something. You don't know what it is it's trying to get rid of, and you don't know why it has triggered this response at this point. So the problem is that we have to get clear in our mind that symptoms are not diseases. Symptoms are a response of the body against toxins that have either come from inside or outside the body, and it's now trying to get rid of it. Once that becomes clear, then you understand the process. And once you understand the process, that's why natural medicine can aid the body in speeding out the removal of these toxins. It is not going to shut them down. The only way the symptoms will leave is that the body has taken care of what it was trying to do, which is to get rid of the poisons. Now, I know it may, at the beginning, think, wow, I got to do a whole rethink. But I can assure you I've done this presentation in much more depth for doctors and dentists and various types of health practitioners, both natural and regular. I have done pharmacists. On one occasion, I've done a group of 100 pharmacists, and the presentation was 2 days long just on this whole concept and all the implications of it. But what I'm trying to do at this point, and I'm not trying, I'm doing it, I'm giving you a basic understanding of it and making available material that can help you understand it better. But we don't want you to think that inflammation is your enemy. Inflammation is in fact your friend, because that's your immune system. So you show me someone who has had, quote, colds and flus over the years, and their body reacted to that. They had a lot of congestion, they've had a lot of mucus. All those things took place. That was the body doing what it's supposed to do, is to get rid of something that doesn't belong there. And also what happens if you suppress it, which is what happens today. If the child gets a sore throat, you immediately take them to your family doctor. He gives you antibiotics. That stops the response. The child feels better. Now the question is, did you help the child? Well, if you understand that the child's throat was inflamed because something was there that shouldn't be there and the body was trying to get rid of it, and you stop that from happening, you are going to push the poison back in. Now, what will happen is that before long, the body will attempt again to get rid of it. It will initiate a new inflammatory response, and you will think, oh my child has gotten a sore throat again. I have to go get some more antibiotics. And so you'll go get some more antibiotics and suppress it again. Now that can go on for several times. Finally, sometimes the body is fighting so hard trying to get rid of the poisons and the residue of the antibiotics and everything that goes with it, that it will just not be shut down by the antibiotics anymore. So then the doctor says, well, I guess we're going to have to cut those tonsils out. And so they do. Now, question, if inflammation is for your health benefit, and if the tonsils inflame because they're trying to get rid of something that is in your body that should not be there, and you cut out those tonsils, you no longer have the symptoms anymore in the tonsils because they've been cut out. Question is, are you healthier? And the answer is, of course not, because whatever they were trying to get rid of, they did not. And you have to understand that tonsils are not just a lump. They are actually a lymph node. And the body has a system in different layers of how it takes care of things. So when poisons are coming through the lymph in the throat area, they will be stopped by the lymph nodes, which are the tonsils, in an attempt to neutralize the poisons, because ultimately, if it can't throw it to the outside, it has to go through the internal processes, and that means going back into the blood and back to the liver. And the liver then has to detox. Okay, but unfortunately, if they're extremely toxic and you put them directly in the blood, you would go into blood sepsis, which could be fatal. So the body doesn't allow that to happen. It uses lymph nodes to stop those poisons and starts producing lymphocytes and phagocytes to neutralize and break down the poisons before they're allowed to go back into the blood. So sometimes they sit like that for a long time because the poisons are so excessive that the lymph nodes will not allow them through to go into the blood. Ultimately, all the lymph is going to empty into the blood system in the area of what's called the subclavian vein, which is on each side of the upper chest, and that we call that in common terms the collarbone. They're called subclavian veins because those bones are actually called clavicles. And so that's where those poisons ultimately have to go to get into the blood, to get back to the liver, to be taken care of. But the body always protects itself, and it always, one way or another, will do something that's for the purpose of improving your health, or at least stopping you from getting sicker. That means if you keep taking all of these antibiotics or whatever suppressive agents you take, you stop the body from getting rid of it, and the tonsils refuse to go down because you have not allowed your body to get rid of the poison. Then they cut the tonsils out. It's not known to medicine in this country very much, but the tonsils are also very protective of the kidneys. Now, if in fact you cut out the tonsils, you allow those poisons to infiltrate downward into the kidneys, now you begin to develop a kidney issue. The early stages of a kidney issue will develop reactions to things which we call allergies. So now the child, you've taken out their tonsils, they're now starting to develop allergies. So what do? You go take some kind of allergy treatment and antihistamines and taking all these things to stop this body's response, which is what the allergy is, it's a body response. So then we stop that. Now the problem can be driven deeper. And of course, I know that ultimately the next step after this is going to be chronic bronchitis or asthma. Now you have a new problem, which it appears, but in fact it's not a new problem. It's the same old problem having progressed deeper and deeper into the system. In other words, you've been pushing it this way or down this way, which is going deeper. And when you see the charts, and if you actually get the DVD and the charts and can see them up close, you'll see where, and I'm going to show you on the next chart here, how this whole thing happens. Now the next chart has to do with a specific case, being the one we just talked about, tonsillitis. So here we have a group of itises, one of which is tonsillitis, in this area here. Now, okay, the body has something going there. Something is going here, and it's in the lymph nodes that we call tonsils in the throat. Okay, so we've got some options. We have three options, in fact, because with an inflammatory response, there's three basic options. Option number one is we just let the body do what it's doing until it recovers. In most cases, probably it used to be at least 80 to 85% of the people, if you did nothing, they will recover. If you allow that to happen and their body can handle it, that's fine. Then you're finished with it. And I've known families that didn't like to go to doctors, and so they just would wait out throat inflammations, which sometimes were referred to as tonsillitis, which again is not a disease. It's a description of what the body's doing. It's inflaming the tonsils. It does not tell you why. So anyhow, if you have that going and you do number one, nothing, the body in most cases is going to correct it anyhow. It may take longer depending on the energy of the person, but it will correct it on its own. If you don't do that, but you take a suppressive agent. Now, a suppressive agent would either be an antibiotic or an antiviral or an anti-fever or a steroid, which tends to shut down everything. You can shut it down. But if you do, you would tend to do what I mentioned earlier about the kidneys. The first likely place that you're going to push those poisons are into the kidneys. Now you have some type of reaction coming from the kidneys, and if you continue to suppress the kidneys then you start to push it across this way. So then you get into things like kidney stones, you get into nephritis, cystitis, all of those types of things related to the kidney system. If you continue, you can develop cysts in the kidneys. If you continue to push, you can develop kidney degenerative problems to the point that you actually may have to go on dialysis. But if you don't, and it doesn't stay there and it goes on, then you can get into an adenocarcinoma of the kidney. Now, all of that caused by suppressing the throat problems over here, by repeatedly doing the same thing. So this is a progression toward being sicker and sicker. The other most likely place is it could go into the pleural cavity around the lungs and produce a pleuritis, or what sometimes is commonly called pleurisy. So in either case, suppressing this brings on something deeper and more serious. Now, if you then suppress this deeper and more serious, then it starts to go across and get really serious. So, on the other hand, if you helped it by giving it the right kind of treatment, and by right kind of treatment, we're talking about something that will help the body do what it's trying to do. Homeopathic medicine is famous for helping the body go the direction it wants to go. So what it can do is when you first took the correct homeopathic and or herb or other supportive natural therapies, you're going to give the body more energy and more help so that it can accelerate the problem and get it out faster. And then it will move to the excretion phases, which means to get it out of the body. Now, since the lymph nodes are part of the lymph system, one of the ways it can get rid of it is to move it up into the salivary glands and excrete it through the saliva, which I did not mention as one of the excretion routes, but it can come out through the saliva. And then it also could come out through the bowel tract, it could come out through mucous membrane, it can come out through the urine, it could come out through the skin. Sometimes that is exactly what will happen. If it can't get rid of it otherwise, it may push it right to the surface and come out through the skin. But your body's going to try to get it out one way or the other. If it were skin, it would be up here someplace. It would go up this direction. If it's mucous membrane or lymph, it's going to come down in this area more until the body pushes it out. Once it's resolved, then it's done. But if it's pushed inward, it's going to go this direction. Now, this is a good sample of toxins from within the body. More often than not, the chronic tonsil things are coming from poisons generated from inside the body. The bowel tract, because of our diet, the byproducts of eating wrong foods, for example, can be toxic to us. So therefore, you could have a big problem. So your body doesn't want to keep the poisons in, and if it's relatively healthy, it's going to initiate this response to get them out. So you always think you want to get it out, or you want to put it in deeper, or deeper this way, which always means getting sicker. So this is what would happen, as I say, more with internal problems, although so it could be a light virus of some type. But I'm going to show you something a little bit more serious and deeper. And this is a virus again, but this is a virus called poliovirus. Now, poliovirus is kind of interesting because it is a virus in a group of viruses referred to as enteroviruses. Enteroviruses are viruses that enter through the mouth and gastric tract. Polio happens to be one, and Coxsackie happens to be one. There's others in that family. So the first response is when it comes into the body, if your body were really healthy, it would mount a defense in the bowel tract. You would think you've picked up a gastrointestinal flu, which in most cases is a virus, and you may have some diarrhea, you may have some nausea, maybe even vomiting, or whatever, and then if your body is strong, it's going to inflame at the bowel level and get rid of it. But let's suppose that you have in fact picked up poliovirus, and your system is weak, and you can't clear it, and or you take suppressive agents because the doctor said, well, we'll just give you some antibiotics just in case. And so they give you some powerful antibiotics, and most of the antibiotics out there today are extremely powerful, which means they shut down immune response, and they shut down all of those symptoms of redness, heat, swelling, pain, and potentially fever. And so he suppresses it. Okay, so once it's suppressed, it can be pushed across this way. And guess where it ultimately has an affinity for if it leaves the gastrointestinal tract? It actually goes for the nervous system. Everybody is probably, if they didn't live through it, has probably at least read or heard about the big polio epidemic that occurred at one time around the world. And in particular, there was a lot in this country. And basically what was happening is that the people who picked up poliovirus and had a strong immune system, they had a big reaction, the body got rid of it, and no one knew the difference. They didn't realize they had polio because it was taken care of by the body's immune system as it first came in the gastric tract, and it never got a chance to go deeper. If they had a very weak immune system, or for some reason very low energy, and or they took suppressive agents of any kind, like a lot of aspirin, some of the other things that were being used, what they did is they stopped it here and moved it across. If it moved into the nervous system, it had an affinity for motor nerves, and so ultimately the person either developed paralysis and or arresting of the autonomic system, the vagus nerve, relating to breathing and heartbeat, and it could be fatal. But I would say that probably a high percentage of those cases either occurred because of the treatment or because the person's system was too weak to be able to take care of it at the entry level. We have a lot of cases today of Coxsackie, which is also an enterovirus, which does the same thing, except it doesn't destroy the nervous system or the motor nerves like the poliovirus does, but it definitely can affect the brain nervous system. It can also affect other areas of the body. It can affect the heart, it can affect the lining of the blood vessels, it can the arteries, it can affect the liver, it can affect the spleen, and they have found it heavily in the beta cells of the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas, which means a good cause of an actual diabetes, type 1 diabetes in young people. If that virus came through the bowel tract, they gave the wrong treatment, pushed it inward, and it got pushed into the pancreas, which can happen over on this side, and it destroyed those beta cells. Then the ability of the body to produce insulin in order to manage sugar is impaired. So there's no way of telling because no one has been looking and really determining, because when you go to the average doctor and you've got some symptoms going on, he's going to assume that it's probably a virus, and he's going to assume that he knows his antibiotics really aren't going to help a virus, but he knows that if you take the antibiotics, it's going to shut down the inflammation and you're going to feel better. And so he's going to give you the treatment that he thinks is going to make you feel better, not realizing that he's actually creating a problem that can lead to a serious degenerative problem because he doesn't understand. And this concept that we're talking about is not taught in medical schools, at least not in this country. So most doctors are trained in management of symptoms. And medicine has been doing that, as I said, heavily since World War II. I'd say it started to get really strong in the 50s. And by the 60s and 70s, it was really taking off that basically pharmacological agents were designed to manage symptoms, to make you feel better. And people thought when the symptoms were managed and they felt better, they thought they were well. But now what's happened is, as I said, if you look and see with the statistics, you're going to see that over the last several years, that the problems in this country have moved heavily into the chronic side. And I know that when you suppress acute problems, you create chronic problems. The average practicing physician in this country is not aware of that. They think that once they suppress the symptoms, the problem is gone. The problem is not gone, only an arresting of the body's immune system. And therefore, they feel better. And how many people were told over the years to take aspirin for their kids for their fevers because fevers are dangerous, and then later they found that they were causing problems because they were driving the virus into the brain nervous system and creating another big problem, so then they told them to take Tylenol. And of course Tylenol is extremely liver toxic. So it's been interesting to watch the treatment. Now the German doctors that I studied with said the Americans were so obsessed with fevers that they don't allow the fever in children, and the fever is the big immune mechanism that helps to get rid of viruses. In fact, viruses are heat labile. That means that heat causes them to fall apart. So if you continue to put in or allow the fever to process like it should, it's going to go up, it's going to take care of it, it's going to help break the virus down, the body's immune system is going to denature it, the body's cleanup system, which would be the phagocytes, are going to come and digest it and get rid of it, and it'll be all gone. And then you will excrete, if it's on mucous membrane or wherever, you'll excrete it out of the body. Now that's what would happen if you allowed it to go like it's supposed to. But what's happened is everybody thinking, well, I just don't like to feel bad, I need something for it, and taking all these symptomatic treatments are elevating the health or sickness bill in this country tremendously. I refer to it as sickness because it is a misnomer. Nothing that is being done by regular medicine today produces health. It is producing sickness, and it's treating sickness. So if you want to be healthy, then you need to understand and you need to kind of rethink the whole process of what you're doing. If once you grasp this, and I've had patients that came in and once they grasp this, they wouldn't think of taking an antibiotic because they realize what it's doing to their system. But the average person who thinks the system is the symptoms are the illness, and it's not. If that's what they think, then they're going to go for the symptom management and think because they've arrested the symptoms that they've actually gotten better. Now there's no way that we have time today to talk about all the causes, both the internal and external, that lead to these problems. Other than just mention our environment is very, very toxic today. Average newborn children that they have measured their blood today have found around 200 different organic chemicals circulating in their blood already at birth that they got from the mother and the mother got from the environment. So here's a child coming in with the blood already loaded with organic chemicals. Guess what has to take care of those? That's the liver problem. And so how many people are having liver problems? Already I know of children in their teens now that are having their gallbladders removed, which is a big sign of a liver problem. So basically everything that we've done, all of the type of food that we eat, the denaturing of the food, the disturbance to the soil, the water pollution and so forth, and incidentally, our next subject is going to be water. This is a good time to bring it up and mention it. We're going to get heavily into water. You're going to find out some things about water you never would have guessed before. We're going to be looking at it from a lot of different standpoints and introduce some concepts that have been proven to be true, but you probably never heard at all. I think you'll find it very fascinating. To me, it's a lot of fun to present these programs because it's interesting to see people get enlightened about things that they had no idea before, to give them a whole new way of looking at health and looking at eating and looking at drinking water and looking at what stress does to them and so forth. So this is going to be exciting to you, and this is going to be a good starting point. If you, as I say, want to really get in depth and get our DVD and follow along with the charts, it's all going to really make sense. Plus there's some other reading material that will go into detail about some of the things that we've just talked about. The secret is the body has a tremendous capability of healing if you give it a chance. And remember that there's three things that can happen when you're into this itis level. First of all, you need to remember again, bronchitis means inflamed bronchioles. Is that a disease? No. That's an immune process to clean out the bronchial area because there's something there that shouldn't be there. If you have dermatitis, is that a disease? No. It means that something is toxic to the skin and the body is reacting to try to get rid of it. Now remember, what you see is the epidermis. The real dermis is underneath, and if there's something poisoning that, it's going to surface it up to the outside, and that's what you'll end up seeing. But that's not the problem. The problem is deeper in at the dermal level. And the same thing with the throat or the ear. An ear inflammation is not a disease, meaning otitis media is not a disease. Otitis media is inflammation of the middle ear. Why is the middle ear inflamed? Well, the doctor will say, gee, I don't know. And it's not important because he has no treatment for cause. He only has a treatment for symptoms. So you can make somebody feel better, but as I say, every time you do that, you're pushing the problem deeper in, and you're making the person sicker. So basically, we're getting down toward the end of this presentation, and I want to kind of recap it for you. I know you're probably going to say, boy, he's being redundant. But what I have found is that it takes a while for the whole concept to really sink in. And sink in to the point that you say, oh, I have a sore throat. My body's trying to get rid of something. What should I do about it? Well, as I say, every inflammation, you have three options. Remember those three options. One is to do nothing. If your body's pretty healthy and your immune system is intact, it's going to carry through the process on its own. And that's probably going to happen in about 80% plus or minus cases, that if left alone, the body would do it. Is it going to be comfortable? No. Fever is not comfortable. Swelling and redness and pain is not comfortable. Having difficulty swallowing with a sore throat is not comfortable. Is it profitable? Yes. your body is trying to get it out. Whatever it is it doesn't want there, it's trying to get rid of. So that's one thing we can do. Second thing we can do is we can dash to our friendly neighborhood doctor, say, oh, I've got a terrible sore throat. He's going to say, okay, take some Tylenol or Motrin or whatever for the fever. So do that. Number two, we're going to give you these very powerful antibiotics that will just help kill out those bugs in there. And see, we haven't really had time to address the whole idea of the germ theory yet. At some later time, we'll get more into that. But at this point, it was too much to try to crowd into one presentation. But just be aware that I'm going to throw something at you that I don't know if you're aware, but if you take a book on microbiology or bacteriology, etc., you're going to find that in that book, when it refers to the throat, it's going to say, oh, well, streptococcus is normal flora in the throat. And when you get to the nose, it's going to say Staphylococcus aureus is normal flora inside the nasal cavity. If you get to the ear, it's going to say Haemophilus influenzae is normal flora in the air. If you get to the lungs, they're going to say pneumococcus or Klebsiella, or one of those that we sometimes associate with pneumonia, which is also an inflammatory reaction. When we get to that, then we say, well, wait a minute, if those are already there, how come we're not sick all the time? If those cause the illness. So just ponder that. I'm just throwing something at you to think about. If strep is always there, then why would suddenly it be a problem? I asked that one time to a researcher at a pharmaceutical company, and he looked at me with a blank look and said, we don't know. Anyhow, it doesn't ever attack you. It's friendly, in fact. And so just keep that in mind, that later we'll go into that in more detail, but it's just something for you to ponder and do some digging about. So at any rate, that you can do something to suppress all that, which then stops the inflammatory process and it pushes it either this way or this way, depending on how much you do it. Okay, the third thing you can do is what? You can take a good natural substance, homeopathic, herbal, or whatever, that will support the immune system, and that is going to cause the body to rapidly move through the fever, move through the inflammatory process, secrete it out and get rid of it, and it's done. That means you've moved to a healthier state and not to, over here, a more unhealthy state. We're coming right to the end, so I want to remind you, you should go to our website because we'll be posting a lot of material on there. Right now, there is a free download, which is a 60-page book on detoxing the body. These are some things you can do naturally to get rid of all these toxins that have accumulated. Just remember that the toxin is the problem, and getting rid of the toxin is what the body attempts to do, and stopping it is to our own detriment. On the website, you're going to be told about upcoming topics. You're also going to be shown other types of material. We have a place to register your email address, and we will then keep you upgraded on what's happening. There's no charge to register. It just means that you are giving us your email, and we're going to be sending you information to keep you posted of future things that are coming up. All the books I talked about, now we didn't have enough time to talk about the matrix in detail, but one that would be very helpful, what I talked about when I mentioned this feller or matrix, is a book by Dr. Pishinger. That is on the book list we have. You can order that from the site. There'll be other things on the site you can get, in particular a DVD of this presentation today and the supplementary material that you can look at and read on your own that will help to give you even more information about it. Our website is mindyourhealthcast.com, and if you have questions or you have comments, we have a forum page you can go to and post your comments or ask your questions, and we'll get back to you. Or if you have a preference for a subject that you would like us to talk about, you can also put that on, and we will then give you all the information that you need in terms of asking you questions, answering your questions, or putting together a program if I get enough requests for a specific subject. But I will tell you the next one is going to be on water, and I think you'll be quite surprised to find out some things about water that are not generally known, but are important for you to know in terms of your health. And I want to thank you for watching this broadcast, And I look forward to seeing you again when we talk all about water. Thank you.